Hey everybody, welcome to Tickle. It's good to be back after my honeymoon through the northeastern United States, which was very lovely. God, my neck looks fat. Yeah. Coffee Lake is coming out tomorrow as of the filming of this video, which means it will have already been out for 2 or 3 days when I actually put up the video. But anyway, now is a perfect time to talk about Coffee Lake and its impact on the secondary market. So if you're watching this video for benchmarks and all the good stuff relating to Intel's latest release, this is not the video for you. But if you're the sort of person, like most of my regular viewers, that likes to keep a few bucks in their pocket and buy something a few generations old, stay tuned, because I have some good and bad news for you. Okay, first let's start off with the basics. Now, while Intel claims otherwise, Coffee Lake is essentially their response to Ryzen. Yes, they claim that they've been developing Coffee Lake long before anybody knew what Ryzen was going to be about, but the fact that Coffee Lake's inclusion into the Intel roadmap didn't happen until after we knew what Ryzen would be is kind of suspect, if you know what I mean. But anyhow, how it came about doesn't matter. The bottom line is the multi-thread optimized era of gaming is here, and the CPU manufacturers have recognized this by upping the core count in all of their core consumer products. So what exactly is Coffee Lake? Well, essentially, from what I understand and from what the rumors have been saying leading up to tomorrow's release, it looks like it's pretty much just going to be KB Lake, but like 1.5 times bigger in terms of core count all across the product stack, more or less, depending on how you do math. So your i7s at the top, which used to be 4-core 8-thread, are now going to be 6 and 12. Your i5s, which used to be 4 and 4, are now going to be 6 and 6. And the oddball, of course, is the i3 at the bottom, which used to be 2 and 4 and has now been supplanted by the G4560, will thus become 4 and 4, replacing the old i5s in terms of core count, but staying at i3 prices. Pricing hasn't been definitively confirmed yet, but it looks like every single price tier is more or less going to stay roughly where it has been in the past, with the i7 being the one exception at the top, which might end up costing a little bit more than they have historically. Now, the reason why I'm filming this video without the finer details and after all the release information has come out is because none of that's really relevant to us. What we know definitively is that i3 processors, the one that really matters in this equation for us, the penny pinchers, the people looking to save money, are going to be quad core, and they are going to directly replace i5s of yesteryear in terms of core count and single-threaded performance. They're going to be the same, if not better, which makes every other chip before it less relevant on the secondhand market. But didn't that already happen with the R3, you're saying to yourself? Well, not quite, for a couple of reasons. Number one, there are still RAM speed and timing issues associated with Ryzen. You know, the early process baby steps that kind of happen every time you come up with a new architecture. AMD cooler and motherboard availability are still slowly meeting demand and all that. Single-threaded performance and IPC on Ryzen is technically and significantly worse than what Intel was offering at the time. And lastly, one cannot underestimate the presence of fanboys, the people that will only buy Intel products and dismiss AMD as being, for some totally unobjective and irrational reason, inferior. But none of that bullshit applies anymore. Coffee Lake i3s are strictly speaking going to be equal to or better than what they are replacing in the i5 product stack, and those were processors that cost considerably more on release than these will. In fact, $117 appears to be the base MSRP price for i3 8100s, and that's actually probably going to be the release cost, because Intel processors, generally speaking, as a rule, usually stick right around their MSRP pricing for the majority of their lifespan. And that was during an era where there was no competition from AMD as well. So being that there is a solid and ubiquitous Ryzen presence, I don't think the retailers are going to have a hell of a lot of room to bump up those i3s in terms of price, even if there is this predicted product shortage that's been talked about recently. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to open up my OBS and we're going to do some real actual secondhand shopping and look for processors that are comparable in terms of core count and performance from Intel's yesteryear, and I'm going to show you just how high those prices are now and explain just why you shouldn't expect those secondhand prices to come down just yet. Okay, so here we are at the Toronto Craigslist, and before we jump into the actual searching, we got to set a baseline. So the i3-8100 is really the target CPU of choice here, and it even compares very favorably to some of the unlocked i5s from previous generations, depending of course on the architecture and how high you can overclock it. Let's see if we can't find some processors that would, at least performance-wise, be comparable to that and compare the prices. Now, assuming the i3 here in Canada sells for about, 15 to 20% more, being that it's Canada and the exchange rate's pretty favorable these days, that would peg it at about 140 bucks Canadian retail. Okay, so here we have a guy with an i5 6600K, never overclocked, mint condition, $230. No longer need this CPU as my hardware is about to be outclassed and I want to get as much as I possibly can for this one before it becomes worthless. That's what he actually should have said. He was being honest, but he's not being honest, and he's just spewing a bunch of bullshit in order to entice you to buy it. Now, in order to get this thing up to the levels of the i3-8100, which is, I think, more or less on the same architecture with the same IPC, roughly speaking, you'd have to overclock it a little bit, but it's nothing that a $5 or $10 cooler probably couldn't handle. So that's out of the equation at least, but $230 is a lot of money. Now, he's getting that $230 price from internet averages, which is how most people price their used items when they go to sell them. They look at what other people are selling them for, and then they just pick somewhere in the middle based on how long they're willing to wait and how fast they want to get rid of it, yada, yada, yada. And then comes baseline price. And there is, of course, some negotiating wiggle room here. I'm sure if I message this person, I might be able to talk him down to an even 200 or 190. But unless he is really in the know about what is about to happen to quad-core CPU prices on the Intel side, he's probably not going to budge that much to make it worthwhile to buy over an i3-8100. So sticking with the unlocked CPUs, we have a few options here. When I searched for 4690K, a 4670K came up. Those usually top out at about 4.5 gigahertz on Haswell, which will get you probably a touch more performance than the aforementioned i3-8100 will get you. But he wants $200 firm, so no. We have a 2500K here for $100, which is pretty much what they go for these days. I've actually seen them for as low as 80. It's the same guy, his price is firm. So let's say $100 is what you're paying for this 2500K. Well, first of all, you have to find a working P67 or Z68 motherboard to actually overclock this thing. And you could probably still overclock this thing to 4.2 or 4.4 gigahertz on the stock cooler, so no cooling solution would be needed to get it up there, and you would be paying $40 less than that i3 would cost you. But again, we're talking about a chip that's 6 years old now. Is it worth it? I mean, I know CPUs last for a long time, but the motherboards that support them are the biggest question mark. It's getting to be the point where Sandy Bridge is not even an option on that basis alone. And again, the RAM is slower, and you got a whole bunch of other factors to consider. No new feature support, no USB 3.1. So yeah, you're saving $40, I guess, on the CPU alone in terms of raw performance, but you're missing out on a whole lot, and it's just a lot more difficult to justify. I don't even know if it would be worthwhile at 80 bucks Canadian, which is almost as low as half price. So here we have an i5 3570 for $20 more than what that i3 will sell for. Again, maybe considerable, but this will require a cooling solution to get up to the same sort of performance level, at least of some kind. Not exactly the greatest cooling solution, but it's going to still run you another maybe 10-15 bucks. Again, we're talking older features, an older motherboard that's out of warranty for sure at this point. Ultimately, the metric that I use in my head, roughly, is a 40%. And that's what you should be saving over the retail alternative that's modern. Because you are taking on some extra risk, what with the older motherboard and all that. So even if you're getting equal performance, you should be saving 40% of the money that you would otherwise be spending. And of course, this is not it. Even if you can talk him down to 100 or 120 bucks, is not even close to worth consideration. Let's look at some of the locked alternatives. So i5 7500s, those were hot shit up until Ryzen killed them. i5 7500 for $210. Locked i5 from the last generation, and here it is selling for $210 asking price. You might be able to negotiate him down to like 170 or 180 or something like that, and it would still be significantly more expensive than you would be paying should you buy that i3. Okay, I've had just about enough of that. Believe me, it went on for a lot longer than it looked like in that little snippet. So the most pressing question here is, will prices come down, and if so, when? I'm sure eventually they will come down, but you'd be really surprised at how much power, gravitas, that's a good word, right? How much gravitas a fucking name like the i5 or the i7 has and carries forward with it throughout the generations, despite the fact that things have completely changed. Just to put it into perspective, there are still people out there in the free world who are building secondhand systems featuring first generation i7s that will sell more for the same sort of spec systems that have a 4th or 5th generation i5. That don't make no fucking goddamn sense at all. So if Intel had changed the naming scheme of their entire product stack to reflect this new change in core count, then maybe you would have seen last generation i5s going for less sooner. Because they carry that i5 labeling, it's going to be kind of hard to shake. Now, ultimately, I'm not complaining, because as a budget-oriented YouTuber, it's my goal to save you guys money, and if we live in a world where there is enough competition on the CPU side, and the envelope is being pushed such that prices are coming down, and very capable, gaming-capable performance components are available at significantly cheaper prices, that is a good thing. But for people specifically like me who make second-hand hardware-oriented videos, yeah. Anyway, my plan is to get this video uploaded and finished by tomorrow, which would be Thursday, which would be October 5th, which would be Coffee Lake release day, which would make a hell of a lot of sense. If that happens, that means that the following day, on what would be Friday, October 6th, I think, I will be streaming with 3 of my friends, and we will be playing Divinity Original Sin 2 local co-op edition. So all 4 of us are going to be seated on my 2 couches down here in the basement. We'll have 2 displays set up with each of them displaying a split screen of this epic open world multiplayer RPG, which should be really interesting, and you can watch us go at it from start to finish. It's going to be an ongoing series, and this will just be the first of many visits that I will have them over for to play this little game that I bought before I went on honeymoon and haven't been able to touch in 3 weeks. Anyhow, that's enough out of me. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and fondle yourself while thinking of me, and I will see you tomorrow night.